works. There we go. Cool. So the recording has started. So this evening I'm going to present the Azure Developer CLI, or AZD. It's a lot easier to say AZD than Azure Developer CLI. It's too long. And what you can do with it. So the little what is it, QR code is a link to my LinkedIn. If you're not connected to me, you want to connect. And let me jump into this. I will post a PDF of these slides on my blog tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about taking any notes or anything. And let's see if I can get the PowerPoint to start here. Okay, so what is the AZD, and basically how's it compared to the Azure CLI? So the Azure CLI, if you've been using Azure for a while, and this is the Azure user group, so I kind of assume you guys are familiar with deploying resources to Azure. If not, we'll have to do another show on that. But the Azure CLI is a tool, a command line tool that you use to deploy resources and manage resources in Azure. And it does a lot of stuff because there's so many different resource types in Azure. But the AZD, the Azure Developer CLI, is geared specifically toward working with provisioning resources and deploying code to those resources. It's a lot like infrastructure as code, but it's geared toward a developer workflow. So see if we can make some sense of that for you. There are two main use cases that I'm going to go over today that I think are the most powerful use cases, and you can get code up and running in Azure really quickly. And I've got the 3 commands here on the screen that it takes to get a whole repo of code deployed to resources running in Azure. So let's take a look at it here. So one of these icons. All right, so let me bump the font up a little bit. So I've got a junk folder here. Let me cd and say AZD. So if you don't give it any parameters or options, it will give you the help. You can see several commands here. I had on the screen, what, three commands, which was going to be the login, the init, and then up. So AZD up will do multiple things. It will actually do, it'll do a package if you need to do a package, provision and deploy. That's what up does. So it kind of does multiple things that you would need to deploy some code. And then the init will actually initialize a folder with a repo of code. It's template based. So as you can see in blue down here, if I want to see what templates are available, which we'll see a little more of this later, but I can show you now. There are several, 80 or 100. We'll see the exact number soon, but you can see there are a lot of templates. And let me grab one here. So CLS. That screen was terrible actually. Let me show you a proper way to do this. So AZD template list. All right, so now let's look at this and then we'll pick one. Code. So open code in the current directory. So here's what we have for the list. It's a little easier to see in this. Off. Okay, so, and as you can imagine, when you see some of these names, several are going to have a lot of resources behind them, and they're going to take a long time to spin up. So the goal with this little exercise is to find one that's going to be relatively quick to spin up so that we can actually see it work. There's 2 starters here that stick out. They don't actually have app code, so I don't want to show those, but these are good starters for you. Here's a bicep starter and a Terraform starter, because it will do bicep and Terraform these days. But there are a few starters that will help you with your templates, which we'll get to a little bit later. So let me find, there's some to-do ones in here that are relatively quick. But you can see, I mean, we got microservices with Dapper, we've got Azure Functions, We've got React apps. So let's grab this one. So like Kubernetes and React, I'm sure that's a good one, but it's going to take a little while to spin up. So the to-do app was one of the original demos, or I should say templates, that AZD started with. So this is pretty tried and true. Let's go AZD init the template name and then paste it. And what this is going to do is say, hey, Jason, your current folder is not empty. Are you sure you want to copy this over here? And actually, no, I don't. So if I say dir, so this is just a directory I created to do some demo directories here. So let me create one for this, and we'll say D3. Change to D3 here. And then now let's try it. So yes, please pull that repo down. And it's downloading the code. It asks for environment names. It's kind of how it labels things, because you can have multiple deployments and name them differently. It could be like, if you want to call it dev, staging, test, you could think of it as an environment name like that, but I'm just giving it a label. So we're going to call it D3. All right, so now what do we have? Actually, let's do those commands first, and then we'll take a look at it while it's deploying. So I've done the AZD init. I can do the AZD auth. I don't really need to because I've already logged in, but let me show you. And when you're using the command line and you're used to doing AZD, you may type AZD auth because that's how you log in with AZ. And it's going to say, okay, yeah, I'll log in, but it's not AZD. So we want to do AZD auth login. So it's slightly different. It actually has two commands. And what it did was open a browser in my other window here. So I'll pick the account that I want, and then that's it. So now it's logged in. So we've initialized it. We have a directory of another one there. So we have a directory, and we have all kinds of files in here. And now let's do AZD up. It's going to ask me because this is a CLI. So I could have said AZD up, give it a location I wanted to go and a subscription, but I didn't. So it's going to ask me these questions because everything in Azure, you have to have a location to put it or spend those resources up. So I'm going to choose my subscription, and I'm going to choose the data center. So it's going to go off and do a couple things. It's going to provision the resources, and then it's going to deploy the sample code out to the resources. So as this is spinning up, let's take a look at that folder that I spun, that I put everything in. I'm going to open it in code on my other window. All right, because I didn't think to do it before I kicked it off. Okay, so bump this up a little bit, maybe. Okay, so this is the sample app, and it's a to-do application. Let me first look at the source code to give you an idea what we're dealing with, and then we can look at the infrastructure stuff. So it's a web app. It is, I believe, Node.js. Actually, we can check source. Actually, it's React. Okay, so we have a React application. And then for those of you who are familiar with React, you know, you look at the package JSON, and then you can see where what the build's going to do. So since this is a JavaScript application, AZD knows that it's going to need to do a npm build and then create the files and then distribute the files out into Azure. There is also an API. So what is the API? It looks like the API is actually a C# project. So there's a ASP.NET API on the back end, and then the front end is the React application. So that's the code that we're dealing with just for a demo here. For AZD, there are a few important things. All right, well, I'll mention them. The Azure Developer CLI will do full lifecycle type functionality for you. So you can actually configure an Azure DevOps pipeline That's what this is. It stubbed one out, and this is a template, so it has one all configured for us. Or if you're not Azure DevOps person, it gives you a GitHub Actions one, so you can do GitHub Actions, and it's really, they make it super easy to connect this stuff to just deploy it in Azure. It wires up the actions and makes the whole deployment so much easier. You can also do dev containers. So they do stub those in for you, or this template has them. Most templates do. It's up to you, because we're starting with a template here. If you're rolling your own template, it's most likely going to be you looking at some sample templates out there to see what they do, and then come up with your own. But the important folder that I wanted to talk about is this Azure folder here. So the Azure folder, this is where D3 is. That's the environment that I gave it. Environment name was just D3, pretty dumb name. So the environment variables that are being used by the bicep that we'll look at in a second is in this file instead of an env at the root level. And you can have multiple environment names. So there is a config file that says which one we're currently dealing with. If we're doing a deployment or provision or whatever, which one of these directories does it need to get the variables from? So that's the .azure folder. The next important folder for AZD is the infra folder. This is where the bicep is. So this is all of the infrastructure as code. You can do Terraform. I've not tried it, but you can do Terraform now. But by default, it uses bicep, and then it's going to depend on which template you start with. Actually, I haven't even seen one with Terraform, but you can do Terraform these days. Main.bicep is where it gets bootstrapped. And if you go looking through here, it's got some pretty cool stuff in it. Like for the abbreviations, this is for the resources when it deploys, because it's all template based, kind of by convention. So it's got the resource name abbreviation in front of it, and then the main bicep is the one that's going to say, oh, hey, we want to do a app service plan and API and all these resources that you need, Key Vault, Cosmos DB. So this is the bicep that will then do the deployment, and this is where it all starts. You can specify parameters that will then go into the environment variables that will then get passed through the bicep, and then sometimes there's output parameters at the end. Yeah, so see here's some output parameters that go into additional app environment variables. Sorry, I can't talk. So all the infrastructure is under the infra. So the infrastructure's code's under the infra. And then Azure.yaml, this is the next important piece of information in this project. So we have services. This is where the web app code is. It's the project under source web. It's JavaScript, so there's going to be DST file after the build happens, and a DST directory of the files. And then the JavaScript language is so it knows what it needs to do when it does the deployment. It's going to be deployed to an app service. This one actually has a hook. So the hook is the way that you can introduce scripts to be run in certain areas of the life cycle. In this case, it's using a hook for a prepackaged. So before it actually creates the build for the JavaScript, it will run this script, and then after it deploys, it will then remove. So basically, it adds environment variable to a file, and then it removes that file after the deploy is done. Then the API project's a lot simpler. It's a C#. It's going to app service, web app, and then it is in the API. So that is all the information in this project. When it's your own code, you're going to be basically working out of the source code, and all this other stuff is just there when you're going to do a deployment. So now let's check and see what sort of resources we have. So it's still deploying, but it has given us this link here. So let me click on it, and then let me open my Azure. So this will take us to the subscription. It says actually the deployment's complete. So this is the deployment of the resources in Azure, not the deployment of the code. So there is that naming difference in the CLI commands, because the deploy in the CLI is the deployment of your code, but the deployment inside the Azure, that's deployment of the resources. And for the CLI, they call it provision. So provision the resources. So let's look at the resource group. This is, which one did I call this? D3, isn't it? Okay, so let's go to the second page, D3. So we have D3. These are the resources that are have been deployed. So the web app is going to come here, the API. You can see it did app insights, our Cosmos database, the dashboard. It actually creates a dashboard, which is kind of cool. So if we go to the dashboard, you can see all kinds of information. It's not probably not live yet, so there's no information show. Okay, so it's still deploying, still in progress. Okay, so let's see what else can we see here. Let's go back. So that's the dashboard. One key thing to know, sometimes resources just don't deploy. So in order to troubleshoot when a deployment fails, like for instance, I've had problems in a specific data center, often it happens with Cosmos DB, that it fails on the deployment, and the chances are if you run it again, it works. But in order to debug that, if you go to the overview, the essentials panel at the top of the resource group, and the way there's a naming convention. This is the environment name that I gave it in the CLI, and then it just put RGD3. So if I gave it some long name, including what the project is, something really descriptive, it would be RG and then whatever it was. So you go to the resource group at the essentials section, the deployment's at the top. So if you click on this hyperlink, it'll give you the status, the timings, and all the information. If one of them has failed, it'll be a red X here, and then you can dive into it and actually see the error messages and troubleshoot what's going on. I can show you another way to help troubleshoot some deployments here in a few minutes too. So that's the resources. Let's see if it's available yet. Okay, so this is still deploying. Sometimes resources take a while. The thing that usually takes the longest is the Cosmos DB, but of course they're all deployed. It's now just deploying the web app, and then it's got to do. So the API is done. It's now doing the web app. So the web app will be done soon. So let's take a look at this. So the web app is deployed, and it's got the Swagger UI here. I don't have anything in it, so let's post one. You know what? Anyways, this is the Swagger UI that comes out of the box because it's a template and they added it to the code. So let's go and see the web UI is usually pretty much done right after. Yeah, so the web is done now. So this is just a to-do application. The unique thing about this application is it's a client and a server. So you have the web app on one, the front end on one web app, and then you have the API on another web app, kind of like you would have in a production environment. So if I just say environment 1, item 2, item 3, you see it's a JavaScript application, or it's React. So it's working, it's going to the API, and it will save them in Cosmos. But since this isn't a talk on Cosmos and how to write a React application, I'll leave it at that. But that is the quick demo and kind of an overview of the files. So let's go back to the presentation. So that was the demo. Now we kind of already went through the template demo, the template detail. So I'll leave it at that. Let's talk about some of the other commands that we didn't see in that quick demo. So we saw the auth. That's just how you make sure that you're authenticated with the proper account on Azure. The config is a way to set some defaults so that I could set like the default subscription or location, all of that stuff. The hooks we saw, but you can run the hooks. So if you needed to say test it, oh, and let me show you this too. So let's go back to here. So this is the application. I've added the Azure Developer CLI extension. So if you do the command and say Azure, so you can see the Azure Developer CLI commands come up. So you can say AZD. It's just pretty slick instead of having to type out all of it. So let's look and see if is hooks available. Hooks is not here. All right, but let's run a hook. So this has the pre-package hook. So let's try running this hook. That's something I haven't done. So a live demo. Let's see if this works. AZD. So again, it's a CLI, so it does what you expect. If I say H, it's going to give me the information. So if I say AZD hooks H, it gives me some information about what I can do with hooks. So and that's a hooks. Okay, apparently I need to type run. So AZD hooks run. Okay, now what? Okay, so now I need a name. All right, so pre-package. I don't know if there's any flags that we can do. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't really seem to be any flags that are globally available. So let's just try running the pre-package hook. Okay, it ran it successfully. So what that would have done, let's dig into this and see. So this should have echoed out a variable to env local, and since it deployed, it should have already been removed. So let's see if this is there. This is the web. This is the web one, so we need to go to the web, and it's going to be under the dist. So let's see, dist, or it should be under dist. Oh, it's actually under the web. So it's right here, env local. So here is that env local we just created. So now let's test the hook to see if it removes it. So if we go here and let's go post deploy, back to this one. Now this should remove the hook, or it should remove the file. So now we go back to the web, and that file's gone. So that's the testing of a hook, that some logic that you want to run before or after a certain part of the life cycle, where the life cycle is it packages it, or it deploys it, or provisions. There's a certain list of hooks that you can put before and after. So that's an example of the hooks. So now let's go back. Well, what other commands do we have here? So we have, that's the hooks. The init we saw, because we brought down the template. Restore, I haven't really used this restore. Let's see what restore does. Actually, we don't have anything to restore. But apparently it restores the dependencies. I'm not sure what that does, honestly. Template, there are several things you can do with the template. We can look more to that in a moment. Deploy is just to, actually, let's do this. So we have a web app here. Let's go to the source index. Where's index tx? So let's find something and change it, and then we'll redeploy it. So where's the index HTML? So here's the index HTML. Let's just put H2. All right, so we changed something in the code. Now let's redeploy it. So my icon I keep missing, so AZD. So since I changed something, it's going to figure out that it needs to repackage it, and it's going to redeploy. Now, deploy again means deploy the code, not the resources. So it's going to leave the web apps exactly as they were. If I change something in the bicep file, it would have, or it wouldn't have, unless I said AZD provision or AZD up, it would then update the infrastructure. But since I didn't do anything with infrastructure, it's not going to change the infrastructure. It's just going to deploy the code out. And with the way that it deploys web apps, you can go to the Azure app, go to the app service. So if I go, we know it's going to the web. So that's this one. If you go to the deployment center, you'll be able to see the different logs here when it updates. Okay, so this was 6:32. So this hasn't updated yet. All right, so now it's updated. So has this finished? Oh, so it's still deploying, but it's pushed it already out. And I should have showed you the debug on this. Actually, so I have another one open here. So if you go to AZD and help, if you are, say, doing up provision package, any of these, and you want to see the detail, just push the dash or type the dash debug, and it'll show you all the trace information as it's doing this. Oftentimes, when yeah, actually, let's do this. So we know there shouldn't be anything to deploy. Let's see what it does. Debug. So it's showing us all the information, all the checks that it's doing. It says it's redeploying, and see that right here it's polling. It's checking to see if it can find something. It's scrolling by so fast. Main.go. Huh? Yeah, so AZD is written in Go, if I recall. I've got a link to where you can find the source code. It's open source, so you can actually submit anything to it if you want to get involved. So anyways, this is there's nothing to deploy here. This is just going to. All right, so it's spun around a little bit. Now it's doing some additional checks. So let me stop this train wreck here. So anyways, the dash debug shows you a lot of information as it is doing what it's doing. So that is the dash debug is on pretty much any of these, especially the managed ones, like if you're doing deploy or doing a up or down. So so we looked at those. Deploy was what we were doing. Down is going to pull all of the resources down. So if you do AZD down and then dash purge, then it won't ask you to confirm. It'll just pull everything down. The env is a way to manage the environment variables, or so sometimes you might want to extract them to run a script, or you might want to change a value. Instead of going to the text file and changing it, you can do that with the env. Package allows you to do the pre-step before the technically it's going to be before the provision in the life cycle if you do up, but you would do a package before you would do a deploy, and then up kind of does multiples together. Monitor, let me show you monitor. So AZD monitor, we have a few things we can do, the dash live, logs, and overview. And the CLI itself doesn't do anything here. It's just going to pop you open to the Azure dashboard. If I say live, it's going to bring up the dashboard for the live statistics for the web app. So here's the live statistics coming up. So if I say item 6, not do anything. Can I delete these? All right, cool. It didn't update because I hadn't refreshed it and I'd redeployed. So you can see the activities coming up. So now if I go to one of the others here, we have AZD logs. Oh, I should say logs. So it pops us open to another location. And this is where you get to choose what you want. I'm always confused like this about this. Like, okay, well, these are the logs, but what logs do I want? Well, let's see if there's any failed. Put in your query. All right, so we've got a couple failed, huh? All right, 10 fails on the robot and 1 on the about auth.main. All right, /main. So that is the logs. So they say AZD monitor overview. This is just that dashboard we saw. Yeah, so this is the dashboard of the application and the API together. So pretty slick dashboard and the ability to see the metrics as it's going on, as it's operating, and is all just those few commands that are ran, AZD init and AZD up to get all that stuff just prepackaged. Again, is all because someone else has already done the hard work and put it into a template for us. You can do pipelines, which I probably won't get into. If we have time to kill, then we can. Try to get GitHub Actions working with it. And if I do the show, if I do AZD show, it will see what's deployed and give me the URLs for it. So we've got an API app deployed. Here's the URL, the web app, and then this is where the resource groups for all of the resources. So that is the majority of them. The version just tells you what version is. Not very exciting. So any questions so far? No questions? Very quiet.
Let's see. Well, I got one question. This is John Cassidy.
Hey.
And you didn't cover pipelines.
Not yet.
But I did have a question. Do you need to use like RBAC or something like that with you instead of the auth or the login part?
Well, the way that it works, if you look at the templates, there'll be a place where the Azure principal is coming into play. So if I look at, say, it's most likely in the parameters even. Yeah, so see the Azure principal ID? That's actually going to be taken from me running the CLI. That's why I had to do the Azure auth login. So the person running the CLI has to be able to authenticate to the subscription, and then it uses that principal. For this is the AZD on my machine. If I do a pipeline, well, then that's a different story. Whenever it configures the pipeline, it'll configure a managed identity for using it through the pipeline.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions?
Pretty awesome, Jason. It's Tim. It's
Well,
good. It was a good session.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So now, what would you really use this for? This is the number one reason that I use it, and it's to get someone else's code up and running quickly. Like for instance, let's look at some templates. So the place where the majority, or I should say all the templates are centralized and you can do some searching and filtering is this place called the Awesome AZD. So if you just Google Awesome AZD, or I've got the link at the end of the slide deck. But this shows you all of them, and again, there are 126 right now. But you can also get at them in GitHub. So if you go to GitHub, here, topics, and then AZD templates. So like, for instance, if you look at, say, this one, you'll see over here where the topics listing are, the AZD templates and AI AZD templates. So most of them have the topic over here, but not all of them. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. They don't all have that. I found a few that that don't, but they do show up in the Awesome AZD. But so for instance, here's some new ones. So here's Azure OpenAI on your data with Python with Streamlit, which is kind of cool because I've never written anything with Streamlit. So that is case in point what I use AZD for. Like for instance, Pamela Fox presented at the group earlier this year. I got her RAG application up and running. It takes about a half hour, honestly, for all of the resources to deploy with her RAG application. And a lot of these RAG applications, let's see how many are in here. So if I say RAG, there are a few RAG applications. Here's one with Pinecone. So if you've not used Pinecone yet, this is how you get actual working code up and running in Azure in a matter of minutes. Granted, a matter of minutes could be a half hour because it has to spin everything up. And with these RAG applications, it's not just spinning up the resources and deploying the code. Oftentimes, they have to also ingest documents, and that post-processing, it just takes time. So they're not, you know, a small number of minutes. Sometimes it will be a half hour to spin them up. But this is the main reason I use AZD these days, is to try out codes, like because like here's one, RAG using semantic kernel. And if you click on this link, the GitHub link is right in the upper center, I guess. So you can actually see the code. Typically, I work backwards. I'll find it in GitHub. I'll clone the repo, and then as long as it has this Azure YAML, and then the Azure YAML is really all you need in the infra folder. That's the two key things that you need to make sure that they have set up for you, and it just deploys in a matter of minutes. You just have to run the AZD commands, and it'll grab it all. So let's do one. This one says vCore, which kind of scares me. Most of them, originally they would tell you kind of the ballpark of the cost, but they don't really do that anymore. And it would be really hard to do across the board. And now that they have community created templates, it's kind of hard to say, oh well, this is going to cost, you know, $5 a week or something like that. It's kind of hard to ballpark that, but that's always a concern, you know. So what kind of resources is it spinning up, and yeah, what does it cost? So if I do a RAG, let's see, it's actually, here's a cool thing, and I just found this today. The Build 2024 collection. Let me refresh this. It seems to have recalled. Huh, interesting. I must have multiple selected because there are more.
You're filtering by RAG at the top.
Ah, geez, thank you.
Ah,
Yeah, you know, duh.
good catch.
So these are all of the AZD templates that they've posted out there for what was used in sessions for Build 2024. So for instance, this one here, ChatGPT enterprise data with Azure. Let's grab this one. Let's see what it spins up. And this is, we're not going to be able to see it do everything, but let's go out of here. Okay, so AZD init, and then it's going to pull it down. Let's take a look and see what it is. If I recall, okay, so this one, this is the Azure. Okay, so this isn't the one I was thinking. One of them will actually creates like 40 resources in Azure. Yeah. So you have to be kind of careful and be prepared to tear it down. And, you know, AZD down pulls it down. So code. This may be the Python one. So if I go to the app, so see this is a lot more involved. Let me bump the size up a little bit here. So this is one that I have actually gotten up and running before, and it's perfect because I don't have to be concerned about what is in this infra folder. They've figured it out. They've realized it needs networking, private endpoints, and they've thought through the bicep that it's necessary to do that. I mean, this is no small feat here. They've really done a lot of pre-work for me to be able to just spin this demo up to check out their code, which is what I typically do. So this is like the back end, this is the front end. So the front end, let's see, what do we have here? Okay, so this is another React UI public. All right, so back end. Okay, so this is the Python RAG application. I think this is the one that Pamela actually monitors quite often. So it's a Python application. So the server side's Python with a front end React, and we saw all of that bicep code that they have, but it does do other things. So it has all of these documents that it will ingest. There is the script here. There's a bunch of scripts in here. Their repo actually documents this pretty well. as to what the different scripts do and when you would need to use different ones, because their application has different options you can turn on. One of them is to use the Azure Auth. So you have to follow certain setup documents to set up your authentication and that sort of stuff. But they've got the scripts all here for you, so they make it really easy. But out of the gates, if you're not doing any of the auth configuration, then you can just do AZD up. So let me show you how to do it with so if I say and then say AZD up, so I click on up, and then this is using it inside of Visual Studio Code. It's pretty much exactly the same UI experience as the CLI. Let's try this. Okay, so this actually has several other things. Like, for instance, it's going to use document intelligence. That is a technology that allows them to send a PDF at it to then retrieve text. So we'll just say wherever you want to put it. And if it uses Docker, I don't believe this one does, but some of the templates do. So just to keep in mind, if it uses Docker, whenever it goes to do the packaging, it's going to fail if you don't have Docker Desktop running. So you just keep that in mind. Okay, so we'll let this one go. This one will take a while. I'll come back and check on this. So that takes us to, we looked at the templates. There's a big, massive set of templates out there, and we're kicked one off, so we're going to look at the sample template when it comes out. Okay, so the next thing I use this for, or the second use case that I wanted to cover, is you can use it with your own code. So say you're doing a sample, or say you're a consultant and you're doing some POCs and you want to be able to have a sample to show clients, but you don't want to run it all the time. You just want a template like this so you can spin it up, do your demo, show people, and then tear it down. And that since it's a template and it's using the AZD, it's pre-baked. It will predictably deploy the resources that you want. If you want them named specific things, you can name them. You don't have to have that random name on there. I can show you how to remove that. But it will predictably spin all of the resources up and predictably deploy it to those resources in a number of minutes. And that's great for POCs, showing clients, and doing demos for presentations. So this is the other option. So if your application falls into these languages, so we've got Node.js, Python, .NET, and Java, and it's going to be deployed to either an app service, a static web app, a container app, functions, AKS, or a Spring app, which that covers a lot of compute options in Azure, then you can use the Azure Developer CLI with your code and create your own template. So let's create one. I'll create a very simple one and show you how easy it can be. It probably won't always be this easy, or it won't always be this easy, but let me show you how easy it can be. And the good thing is there were 86 templates or 100 and some odd templates. So there are a lot of templates out there for you to pick and choose parts from to build your bicep out. Honestly, when you're building a custom template, the bicep is going to probably take you the longest, because you're going to be able to do the code. That's not the problem. It's the bicep and all of the settings and passing the environment variables back and forth. That can take up quite a bit of time. So let me show you how easy it can be. We're just going to do an ASP.NET application. This one we'll do Razor Pages next, but I want to put it under my junk folder. Okay, we'll call it, let's call this AZD5. Okay, it's fine. So this is Visual Studio, or it's going to launch Visual Studio. Now I have a PowerPoint in the back. So this is Visual Studio, everyone's favorite. I still do a lot of development in Visual Studio. I will do front-end dev and code, but let's verify that the template's working. It should be .NET 8. Just this template. Nothing fancy about it here. So what we want to do is create this template and get it up and running in Azure in as little as we can possibly do. So I'm going to close it because I'll show you why. It actually moves some files around, which is why. So cd 5. So this is our directory, and for everyone who's familiar with Visual Studio, you know, we've got the, I didn't check the box, so the solution file is outside, and then we have another one where the project is. So this is the directory, pretty simple. I'm just going to do 2 dots. Here is our directory, and we want this to become a AZD template. So we say AZD, and this is relatively new in it. It says, oh, hey, do you want to use the code in the current directory? Or do you want to select a template? I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, I would love you to make a template out of that code in the directory. Confirm. Okay, so I'm not adding or removing anything. So I definitely want the default selection here. We're going to call it D5, just simple. Okay, cool. So now let's open it in code, because code's just easier to see this stuff in the demos, because it shows you all the files where Visual Studio doesn't. So now we have the Azure folder there. We've got the selection, so it's already defaulted to 5. We've got an environment name. Okay, that's cool. It knows what to call it. We've got an infra folder. Look at this. So we've got a main.bicep even, and it's decided that what are we going to make this out of? Okay, so anyways, we have a bunch of template stuff here. If we go to the YAML file, anyone want to guess what sort of deployment it's going to do here?
Linux.
Yeah, it's going to stick it into a container app.
Yep.
So it's going to, it figured out, okay, so it's a .NET app, and it didn't say C#. It's .NET. I'm not sure why, or why it distinguishes one versus the other. It knows where the project is. It's under the web application folder. It's not under a source folder, and it seems to be okay with that, which is cool. It's going to say, hey, we're going to package it into a Docker container and make a container app out of it. So yeah, so let's do this. Say AZD up.
You didn't have to say package first or anything. No, I guess you already.
No, because up will do that for us.
Okay.
It needs to know where I want to put it. I always forget to tell it. Well, I wouldn't want to type that anyway. So now it's saying, okay. The funny thing here is it's using a framework I hadn't heard of, and I don't even know how to pronounce it. Oryx, ORYX.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it uses that to do the packaging. It can do multiple technologies, is why it uses that one. So it could do a .NET one, it could do a Python one, I think. I'm not sure about that, but it does multiple technologies is why it's there. So it's packaging up this container, and then it's going to deploy that container app. And as it's doing this, let's check on the other one, see if it's doing anything yet. Actually, let's go to Azure, because I'll be able to see the resources easier. So let's pick any one of these. Resource groups is the easiest way to get here. Page 2. So we were just doing D5. Well, there's nothing here yet. So this must be the big Python app that we were looking at. So you can see here's OpenAI is deployed. There's the document intelligence app, insights for the web app, dashboard again, the Azure search service is deployed. The log analytics is there, the app service plan, storage counts there. Is there anything still deploying? Let's see here. 22 succeeded. One of them still going. The web app is still going. So you can see all of this stuff. All I did was pull it down and then told it to push it up. So what's going to happen is it's going to deploy. What it's going to do is it's going to deploy the resources or do the provisioning step, and then it's going to do a lot of post stuff, which it won't finish. So this is the one that we were just looking at. This is the Python application. So you can see what we've deployed so far, and this is the experience of using the extension in VS Code. So again, it's a lot like the command line here. So it's updating the resources, and then next up, I think it will start deploying, and then it will go through the scripts. So let me put this gentleman in. Okay, so if I go, sorry, we want to look at the Azure YAML, and then and again, sorry about flipping back and forth, but we're deploying that simple ASP.NET app that I just created, and then it stubbed everything out for me. But now I kind of flip back on you, and this is the Python RAG app, and that's deploying right now. So it's doing some of its data pre-processing, but let's look at the file here. So the Azure file is where it's driving all of its activity. Let's go to Azure YAML. Oh, sorry, we gotta close this window. So it has several hooks. So in the back end, we've got a prepackaged hook, and you'll often see this on templates. We've got one for Windows, and you have one for POSIX. And then you've got two different flavors of scripts too, be a shell script and a PowerShell usually. So there are scripts in the front end folder, npm install, npm run build. So this is telling exactly what it needs to do. Pipeline, we're not into the pipeline stuff yet. Here's some more hooks. So we have a provision auth init, and then a shell script, post provision. So this is the data prep. So when I've installed this before, I've had it fail because that document intelligence service that it deploys, I believe, is a pretty low tier cost, which is good for a public template, but sometimes it will hit a limit and it'll hang on me or barf out, and I'll have to restart it. So you can rerun the post provision hook and have it do it through here. The auth update, if you're not doing auths, then you can actually just remove this and do the prep docs. But I've had to rerun this script or this hook manually before because it does do quite a bit of data processing, and yeah, so see, it's processing the PDFs right now. So this isn't going to finish because it takes a while to send all the documents up. But let's look at that.
Are those scripts, can they be run on a Mac as well? Or just Windows?
I believe so. I believe, yeah, if you're using Bash, it would do this one. So you can do PowerShell on Macs, right?
Yep.
I'll
Yep.
confirm that this works on, generally speaking, works on Macs.
Okay. Yeah, so the install, you can do Linux, Macs, as well as PCs, of course.
Yeah. But the POSIX is basically the Bash stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, so yeah, and if you want to see what it's doing, it's the prep docs, because I've had to kind of dive through how all of this works. I was looking at the PowerShell, not the shell script, but see what it does. It actually uses another Pi. It uses prep docs Pi, so it uses the script to kick off the Python script, and then passes all of these arguments. Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, most of these are coming back from the bicep file that ran. So the bicep file runs and then it comes back because they weren't all known ahead of time. So like the storage container, that probably would have been known ahead of time. But like for instance,
Any IDs or something probably everyone would know.
yeah, like the OpenID service, once it gets deployed, here's a custom URL. Yeah, some of this stuff, it won't be known until the resources have been deployed and then comes back. So this is kind of a complicated script, but
Oh,
again,
that's why he writes to that env file, puts that file in there for him, right?
well, this will actually pull. So this is the PowerShell to pull the environment variable out. If you go to the env, I don't know that all of them come out here, but you can write them all out to it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that, since this is running here, I can't really show you. But if I go to here and I say AZD,
You're on D5.
failed.
You're in D5.
Yeah, that one failed because I probably, yeah. So this is, yeah, let me do a new environment, env. How do you do a new one? So let's do a new env. So let's do env new D5A. Okay. And I think I have to select AZD. So I was doing quite a few practices today, and in case you don't know, Azure Key Vault, and I know that OpenAI resources used to, I'm not sure if they still do, they will do a soft delete by default. So if you go to here, let's just go to the resources here. And actually, it's easier if I go to just say Key Vault. You may not see it here, but if you go to manage deleted vaults and then pick the proper subscription, let's think about it. I still have all of these soft deletes from demos that I was doing this morning, and by chance one of them happens to be the same name as the yeah. So the unique string doesn't always make it absolutely unique. It may be for resources that aren't deployed, but if there's been one that has been purged, then you won't be able to redo it. So key vaults are the ones that I usually get caught with on that one. So anyways, let's try this AZD. So we created a new environment. So let's see here. This is that simple web application. So let's see, this has two environments under it now. So we have the new one, and then we've selected it, so this was changed. So now we can try deploying to that one. So AZD deploy. Let's just go ahead and deploy the other one. So the other one failed. So actually, I've got a provision anyways. Anyways, let's do AZD up again. So it's going to do a brand new one. So it's going to spin all those up again. Let's see what we got going here. So yeah, same one I've been using. We'll let Microsoft pay for it. So it's going to do this build again. So the let's see, I believe I've covered everything I wanted it to in my slides. Like I said, I will put this slide deck on my blog tomorrow, so you'll be able to download it with all the links. The documentation is good. It's pretty much where you can find all the other links. They've done a really good job at linking like the AZD templates. There is a good Microsoft Learn. So if you really want to get hands-on with this, the Learn here, this module, has two other modules. This is the one that will walk you through how to create your own template. Wait, sorry. This one is how to create your own template from scratch. And it will also walk through the configuration in GitHub, how to get it configured in GitHub and the steps that you need to do for that. And then this is the one to create your own template. And this is kind of an intro. So this is pretty good. I mean, it doesn't take too long to do, but it's definitely worth the time. And it's nice that they put those together for us. The reference, let me show you the reference on here. So this is kind of a lot like the help on the CLI, but this Azure YAML isn't really in the CLI. It's in the code, of course, for your template to run, but this is information on what's in it. There's a lot of stuff in here. Like for Kubernetes, if you're doing stuff to Kubernetes, there's stuff in here that's only for Kubernetes. Here's stuff for like the Docker options. Here's the AKS stuff. So deployment targets are going to have different settings in this YAML file, and this does an okay job at it. It's not. It could be better. I'll put it that way, because I would like to have an explanation of like this dist build. Okay, so what does this mean? I know what it is because just from experience in knowing that it wants the folder where the JavaScript build has put the files, but why is it called dist and not files or something? Yeah. Anyways, that's me being nitpicky. I'd like some explanation of those. Oh wait, maybe this is it. Ah, what do you know? It is there. Okay, I take that back. Maybe it is decent documentation. Anyways, so this is where all that information is for the Azure YAML file, and that can definitely be useful when you're writing your own templates, especially. Okay, so now there were a few other links on there. The team blog. Okay, so in case you don't know, most of the .NET teams and several Azure teams have community office hours.
As well as
Stop. They are under the Microsoft, well, this one's under the Microsoft Azure developers. Most of them fall under the Reactor. So here's the AZD community stand-up. There is one tomorrow. Here's the app service. Semantic Kernel has one. Theirs is also tomorrow. But there'll be an hour. Often it's a presentation along with the team. If you have questions, it's like with the Semantic Kernel, half the call usually is people asking questions for projects, things that they run into on their projects, and you can actually interact with the team members and get questions answered. So that's the community stand-up. So AZD has one. They just restarted it again. They had stopped doing it for a little while. The team blog, so the place where a lot of the announcements are made, are actually underneath the AZD or the Azure SDK blog, but they have their own tag. So if you see here in the URL, the link that I have in my notes is to the Azure Developer CLI tag. So this is the different blog entries that they've made on things that they've released this year, and they'll often basically say what's new in it, if there's any community contributions, they call those out, new templates. So the blog's pretty informative too, and a good way to keep up to date. The code is actually here. Along with most of the open source projects, they've got discussions, they've got the pull requests, the issues, so you can really get a good idea of what's going on with the project. If you have any problems, you have a good place to get feedback. I don't know that they have a Discord channel, because that seems to be another thing that a lot of the teams do have, and I don't know that the AZD team actually has a Discord channel, but Semantic Kernel, for example, does. So let's check the other deployment out. What I want to see is this simple web app deployed. So this is still the Python one. It's still going. I didn't forget. So let me go to, actually I want the D5 here. Oh. Well, let's see if it deployed. Any one of these resource groups. So do we have a D5? D5. So we do have a D5, and we have a D5.8. That's going to be the more complete one. The other one actually failed, so this would be a good way to show you some troubleshooting stuff. So essential. So here's where the key vault failed. So we saw the error in the console, but here's another place where you can get more information for why it failed. So D5.
Hey,
yeah.
Jason, just out of curiosity, I noticed, some architecture, like preferences, I guess, you'd have one key vault, but you'd have a bunch of secrets or whatever you want in there. And it looks like there's a key vault per resource group, right? Is that what this is doing? So you can do an up and a down and not destroy stuff that was already there?
Yeah, that's the way almost all of the templates are working. Is they all work within one resource group, and then
Bingo.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
all in there. It's
Okey doke.
not. It's not necessarily enterprise level infrastructure as code. It's great for getting an application up and going, and it's great for small projects. But whenever you get to like a multi-repo scenario, you're going to be
Yeah.
in trouble, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. This is good.
Yeah, you can definitely
Okay.
do quite a bit with it. So let's see if this thing works. So go back to here. Let's go to the web app. So it put it into a container app. Remember, I just did that template for the ASP.NET application. Didn't do any scaffolding, didn't do anything. And look at this. It's out there. And all I did was the AZD init and, you know, a few selections, and it figured everything else out for me. I didn't do any bicep. It's almost like the right-click publish, but the bicep files are there. It's something I could build off of and really turn this into a decent template. But nonetheless, that's how simple they've made the simple stuff. When you've got a more complicated app, it's going to be more complicated. But that's all I've got for this evening. If anyone has any questions,
How would you size this up against Plumi? I think it's called Plumi. So
I believe that one in say Terraform is going to be geared more toward your enterprise level infrastructure as code.
okay.
But if anyone else has an opinion, feel free to chime in on that.
Just trying to see how friendly it was Plumi, but this is friendly to, you know, .NET developers and people using Microsoft. I think I think this is pretty good from a developer standpoint.
Yeah, I think the one reason the number one use case that I mentioned is they've got so many samples out there, and you know it's like Python. Okay, I can read Python, but I don't know the first thing about getting up and running, so I don't have to. I just say AZD up, and they've already done the work for me, and it deploys it in Azure. I can play around with it, and then I can reverse engineer how things work because it's open source, and which is the main reason that I use it. So
Hey, do you think this thing will work inside a code space? All this stuff? The AZD
I don't
stuff?
know. It will.
I'll let you know. Okay.
I think it will. I think it will.
Yeah, I think it will too. It looks like, yeah, providing all the forward slashes and backslashes are in the right place.
Yeah, the one other thing which you can find if you Google, I didn't put on the slide deck, but it's in the documentation, is the installation area. Where's the install? Right here. Yeah, so Windows, Linux, Mac are dev container. So it uses winget. It does. Let's see, where does it mention this? Yeah, here it goes. Here's the mentioning. It actually does use the GitHub CLI and it uses the bicep CLI. So it will pull those in and run those in the AZD scope. So they're not installed globally, which is.
If you're running on a Linux box inside code space, it says developer box. That's just a VM basically. I think what that implies, I guess.
Yeah, and you can easily get it up and running. So I had it running in Ubuntu earlier.
Yep.
Or AZD. So it actually installs quicker here than it did on Windows. But I guess that's just a file copy. And that's it.
Pretty cool, Jason.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the interaction. I sometimes was wondering whether or not.
Dude, this is stuff I've been cranking with bicep, with